At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability. ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
This is your waiting for the reprieve from the governor leader fan radio network.
Excuse me?
And KFAN.com. 1 minute and 45 seconds past 3 o'clock Central Standard Time. Welcome back. It is a Tuesday edition of the Bumper to Bumper program on a rather wet, rainy for the moment, but snowy coming up Tuesday afternoon here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. I am the host of the program. My name's Dan Barreiro, former Ink-Stain-Wretch, newspaper The Twin Cities. Guardsy is the producer of the program as well. We're delighted that you are along for today's Fat Tuesday ride, as we like to say in the business. The 3 o'clock bell clanged the top of the hour with no indication that the Minnesota Vikings beat the deadline and franchised quarterback Sam Darnold. Not a big surprise, given that many of the Jackals, starting with really shortly after we signed off yesterday, said growing sentiment that the Vikings would not franchise Darnold, but, and the but was Ron Rosenbaum big. The but was they still might want him back with just an old-fashioned contract, which I think raised a lot of eyebrows. Now, will we have resolution on that by the end of today? I doubt it, but maybe we will. I do know Kevin Seifert's going to join us with the very latest at 3:30, and I'm sure we'll delve deep into that particular question and that particular issue. And what I sense, in the old days, these are more black and white movies. I feel like there were like 7 or 8 Jimmy Cagney movies in which a buddy of his was wrongfully convicted on a murder charge. And at midnight, he's going to the gallows. It's over. Getting the death penalty. And he's desperately waiting, with Jimmy Cagney's help, for that midnight, just before midnight phone call from the governor with the reprieve, saying, at the very least, we might not be able to exonerate you, but we are not going to end your life tonight. This feels very much like that as it pertains to Darnold's second life here in Minnesota. It really does. And I will be honest with you. I think right now, if I'm reading the tea leaves accurately, and I know I'm not one of us, but I've been around for a minute or two, my sense is that if the Vikings announce later tonight, tomorrow, anytime within the next week, that they have agreed to terms on what I'm assuming would be a 2-year contract, maybe 3, but then the third year is not automatic, that kind of thing. There's advantages to calling it a 3-year deal financially. That we've signed him to a 2-year deal for, let's say, what would the number have to be? I think it would have to be $60 million minimum for the 2 years, wouldn't it? 60 in that range?
Probably.
My sense is most people who listen to this program, consider themselves Vikings fans, will be devastated. They'll be, what's the famous PA sounder? No! I really do. I think most fans had already moved on. They said, okay, we'll keep the franchise thing as a possibility because that doesn't mean he has to necessarily come back. And then maybe we do. Maybe we're lucky and we get a 3rd-round pick, perhaps even, dare we dream, a 2nd-round pick for him. So he doesn't walk for nothing. Yeah, there's a supplementary pick, but you know and I know it's not automatically a 3. That would be for the next year, and that depends on a lot of variables. So I think that's where most people were. They're saying, well, there's no way they're actually going to try to sign him. because they're not going to be able to compete with whatever is out there. And we don't want them spending much money on him. I'm ready to go. J.J. McCarthy, put him in. Let's move forward. Think how odd that is. People will be devastated that a quarterback who threw for 37 touchdowns last year and did he end up winning Comeback Player of the Year or not? He didn't, but he was in the mix. Ultimately, he was allowed in, even though by the old criteria, they'd said originally he shouldn't count. But I don't think he won. No, he did win it. Did he win it or at the NFL Awards Super Bowl Sunday week or not? I can't even remember.
Joe Burrow won it.
Burrow won it, okay. But he was in it.
He was in it.
He was in the mix.
Because I saw him at the honors ceremony. I remember that. I'm like, did he get it?
He sat in the front row.
Yeah, he had a better seat than KOC.
I really believe there will be fear and loathing and bitterness. And look, I get some of it because of the way it ended. Your last impressions of this quarterback are not favorable, right? Although, as we talked about yesterday, he was miserable in the Lions game. He was not very good in the Rams game, but I do think coaching had a great deal to do with the way that went and even performance by the offensive line. You could even say both games to a certain extent. But I'll be very curious to see where Seifert is on this thing. Or does he think, is this the Vikings way that they deep down think, well, we need to placate the fans who want to at least think that we gave it our best shot to keep him? Because I think they're misgauging the market, misreading the market, if some of this is PR, to just sort of, hey, we're in it. You know, we're in it all the way to try to find a way to bring him back. Because I think if you did a vote today, it would be 85-15. 85-15. Move along. Nothing to see here. It was fun. We saw his limitations in the end, and J.J. McCarthy's the perfect young quarterback.
I think that's probably the right percentage. And people they've talked themselves into it now for a while, too. That's the other thing.
I think because they've been conditioned to expect it.
Yes, we've had some momentum, so then you start rationalizing it and thinking about it more.
Yes.
I certainly kind of got myself in that position and thought, you know what? It's a lot of money to give to Darnold. They have all these other needs. Let's just run it with the kid and see what happens.
Could he be the rare bird in professional sports? Because he's not a spring chicken. He's been around the block a little bit. I mean, he's not old, but he didn't just get to the National Football League. He has been perhaps traumatized more than we know by his experiences in at least one of the other stops, right? It would probably be two, Carolina and New York, right? That he's going to be willing to leave, like, I don't know, $20 million a year on the table, $40 or $50 million on the table, because he says to himself, I've been there. I don't want to be traumatized again. I don't want to go to a team where I know I'm going to be secure on the money, but I'm not at all secure that I'm going to succeed and anywhere near the level I succeeded this year before things went off the edge of a table. Could he be that rare bird who says, I don't care what even my agent tells me?
Right.
Or is it possible part of this is we are ultimately going to find out that the market is not, and that he has already found this out, he and his agent, that the market is not as robust as many of us assumed it had to be, given the number of teams looking for a quarterback and the relatively scant options available to most of them.
He did say a couple of times in the last month, there's no place I would rather be. There's no place I would rather play. And that always comes, truth time always comes with that, right? When other factors come into play, like the finances that we're talking about. The clarification we need to get from Seifert are about what would happen if they did tag him and trade him.
Yes.
What the $41 million would represent.
I keep being told it wouldn't, that wouldn't be, maybe depending again on the date, that wouldn't come back to them. But you're absolutely right. That's a key. That's a crucial part.
Because I think I saw
this conversation.
An agent mentioned today.
I saw
our guy Blake Barrett's that they would be on the hook for it, and then
which makes no sense to me. But hopefully Seifert can clarify that,
because then the compensation that they would even get, they'd have to get a really good deal in a trade.
Number one,
that would be better than your compensatory pick that you would get for just letting him walk.
Correct.
So it is riskier than maybe we think.
We'll try to get, it would be in that eventuality if that is indeed true, and that is one of the questions that we need to have answered. I mentioned Seifert at 3:30. Lou Nanny's going to join he's back on color analysis duty, not for the state high school hockey tournament. That ship has sailed. No, he's on Minnesota Wild TV duty. So he is already Dateline Seattle. We are playing the Kraken. I think the first time we played the Kraken since like the first week of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk to him about the current condition of the Wild, the injury updates, the trade. We'll also try to cover some high school hockey with him, even if his mind might be elsewhere at this point. There are a couple questions I'm going to at least try on him, too. A couple people are talking about incentives. Could you come up with something creative that's incredibly incentive laden? Yeah, you probably could. It's not going to be anywhere near as good a deal as if he goes someplace else. But again, maybe we're going to find out there's not as much out there for him. Or maybe, as I said, he's the rare bird who says, I don't want to go back there, man. I know what it's like to be traumatized as a phenom who came in with great expectations, and I do like it here. And if they're willing to get to a decent enough number with maybe some incentives to sweeten the pot, yeah, you know what? That's what I'll do. Because he could make the argument that at the end of next year or even the year after, he's still not 30. And he could say, I can still maybe,
That's
then
true.
If I have another really good year, if you want to think of this as just would be like a 1-year extension, then I've enhanced my chances to go someplace else. Or I force these guys to say, this is the guy, we're going to have to consider trading JJ. Maybe the Vikings trade both JJs and get all kinds of draft. Imagine how much draft capital we could get if we traded both JJs. There's not enough number ones in the world, are there?
Unless the Wolves are going to get some of that. I don't think I want.
Yeah, the Wolves could use a couple. There's no question. Let's get our first. Are we putting your grant in anybody's hand this week?
We are not.
All right, then let's take a quick pause, and we'll get to a reaction via the Bradshaw and Bryan KFAN text line 64686. Lou Nanny will join at 4:30 from Seattle, Washington. Bottom of this hour, Kevin Seifert, ESPN, and ESPN.com will join as well. I'm well aware of what people are saying regarding the Wolves' home game tonight against the Sixers. They're telling us, you can say it's loser-proof, Dan. But have you been paying attention to the way this team customarily, at least this season, does business? And I will say to you, stop. Tonight's game, write it down. You got a pen?
Yeah.
Tonight's game is utterly and completely loser-proof for the Minnesota Timberwolves.
I hope you're right.
Spread is, I believe, between 15 and 18.
It continues to climb.
And it continues to climb. Philly, if I had this right, has nobody left to play. They're going to be signing people off the street. We know about the big man. What's his name? Embiid. They shut him down.
He's out.
He's out. And ponderous. And injured. Tyrese Maxey injured his back last night against the Blazers. By the way, that's another thing. They just played last night. Schedule loss. So I'm assuming Maxey's out tonight.
He's out. He's listed as out.
It's official. Yep. He's out.
And he's good.
He's extremely good. Paul George missed Monday's game with a groin injury. Is he out too?
He's listed as questionable.
Well, he won't play. There's not a chance in hell. Your guy, Kelly Oubre Jr., is day-to-day.
He's probable.
With an illness, and Justin Edwards re-injured his sprained ankle on Monday night. So, this is, I get it. I know the history. It's loser-proof tonight. Absolutely, utterly, and completely loser-proof. It doesn't even matter who plays for the Wolves. And did I see Randall listed as questionable?
Yes.
Is that just a continuation deal, or is that because he played last game?
Yes, he did play. He played well. I think it's just a continuation of what he's been dealing with.
Okay. Just want to be sure. And we expect Ant to play tonight, right?
We do.
This would not be a good night for Ant to even consider a technical foul, no matter how badly he gets jobbed by the officials.
There shouldn't be any reason to get one tonight, to your point, like you say. Just come out, be professional, handle your business, and get ready. I think the Wolves play again tomorrow night. I think they're on the road against Charlotte. I think they get right back to it.
Who's that?
The Wolves.
Oh, that's right.
I think they have a back-to-back.
Yeah, you're right. I think that's true. Charlotte's not very good. That still might be more dangerous for the reason you just lay out. Second game back-to-back.
We got to travel.
We got to travel on the road, the whole bit. That combination of things. Where was I? Speaking of the Ant Fowl situation, where did it go? Oh, man. Did it disappear on me? Yeah, I can't find it. This was, I responded to something that came in during the Common Man program that he did not respond to. But now, in the meantime, Peter Popsicle is wondering, PST worthy, comparing someone on death row to Darnold not being signed by the Vikings but moving to another team and still making millions of dollars. Maybe, I would say, think of this figuratively, not literally. I compared it to a movie death row, and the point I was trying to make was Darnold's second life in Minnesota. But yeah, I mean, if you want, in general,
I wasn't taking you literally.
Would there be more at stake? Probably. If you're on death row?
Yes.
And it's 5 minutes to 12 and you got 5 minutes for a reprieve, then which direction the Darnold deal ends up going, like here or there, someplace else? Yeah, I'm going to lean towards the reprieve. And that being perhaps that kind of reprieve.
Not every Vikings fan would agree with you, though.
No, apparently not. Not according to these texts that are coming in. I can't find it. It was another how does it disappear? Another delusional listener who was trying to chide Common for apparently dismissing the notion that Anthony Edwards gets jobbed by the officials every 15 seconds. And he uses as his point of comparison Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. And I'm just telling you, if you care about Anthony Edwards' present and or future, don't be an enabler. You never know how word gets to him that even on that stupid show in the afternoon, as Darren Nelson used to call it, they're calling into the KFAN text line 64686 and absolutely justifying my rants, my feeling like a victim. You don't need to enable the behavior and to keep it going, especially when Anthony Edwards gets to the foul line plenty, analytically speaking, as was laid out by a piece in the Pioneer Press. I think he does trail Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, but let me also mention this. Literally no one in basketball drives into the paint as often as Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. Even Edwards doesn't. Edwards is more likely to want to take a three. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is a throwback.
Yes, he's old school.
In that he's combo platter, take threes, take what we call, it's something in the business that used to be called mid-range, the mid-range shot.
Michael Grady refers to it as midi. The middies.
And then also go to the basket and either try to get a score on a layup or get fouled. Nobody does it quite like that, but I can't find it. I wish I could find the, because I tried to get them going, but it's unfortunately missing. There's a little softening now if the price is right on keeping Darnold. If indeed there's real momentum on the part of the Vikings for saying we're not going to franchise him, but we're not ruling out, we're not giving up on the possibility that we can come to terms to bring him back. Now, if you bring him back, do you promise him the starter's job? By definition, does he have to be the starter at the start of the season if you bring him back?
Yes.
I think he kind of does.
Because otherwise, why are you doing it?
Well, giving yourself a little bit of a...
Well, they do love to say we have optionality.
Mm-hmm.
They do love to say we love the whole room. And they include everybody.
How much?
Even guys we haven't heard of, they include in the quarterback room.
Here's what's different about this year. I don't even know if our schedule's been set. Whenever our home opener is, and whoever it's against...
It's usually in May when we find that out.
If he struggles through the first half of the first home game, there will be boos. It's a completely different setup than a year ago. There couldn't be boos last year because you're asking for Mullins to play.
Right.
Right? Because JJ was out for the season, no matter what you thought. So that is another factor here. Everything in that regard is going to be different from the beginning for S. Darnold. If he is the starter, any struggle he has, any interception he has, the JJ chant will be heard inside the People's Stadium.
That's true. That's probably something you do have to think about when you're thinking about bringing him back at all, because he now presumably is healthy and ready to go.
Yeah.
So there is that part of it, too. That's why it was so dumb for the Falcons to draft Michael Penix, even though they ended up going to him, and Cousins was awful. But they set themselves up to have a messy situation, in that case, pretty needlessly.
They did.
This would be a variable
if Cousins had played better,
right,
it could have been avoided.
But even drafting him, though, set that up.
There's no question.
So this would be a little bit of a mini version of that.
Well, to be honest, they might feel vindicated, as odd as it sounds, as perverse as it sounds, because they may say, well, we did roll the dice on Cousins, and it turns out he's not as healthy as we thought, and we think he's shot and he's done. At least we don't have to wait. Like all these other teams that are looking for somebody at the quarterback spot, we've got our answer, or we feel like we already have our answer.
But they don't have much money.
No, that's very, very true. Finchie told PA today that Randall is expected to play. That's Scott in Robbinsdale. The PST committee doesn't care about context, which is 100% true.
Mm-hmm.
Context is pretty meaningless. No Darnold, even at $20 million. Think of the pass rusher we get for that. Well, again, you're assuming you'll get one. You might not. You might have more options, but yeah, well, I'll be honest. Maybe I'm forgetting how bad it got late. But if I can bring Darnold, I think I've said it. I'm on record. I can't walk away from it now. That I've said a couple times on air, and people mock me because they said, "Was no, we were going to get him this cheap. If you can get him for 2 years, $40 million, that I would do it." I think I would. Wouldn't you?
I'd have to think about it again because I'd already settled in on my new position. I'd have to really think about it again.
I mean,
but I wouldn't be 100%. I wouldn't be automatically opposed to it like others might be.
I don't think it'd be preposterous. Put it that way. We'll find out where Seifert is on all of this smoke, where there's smoke, where there's fire, or whether it's still more than likely that Darnold has thrown his last pass as a member of the Vikings. Kevin Seifert, ESPN, is. Questions for Seifert hit the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line 646-886. He joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems Hotline. Obviously too terrified to consider coming in on a Stonami day, even though all it is at this point is rain. Where are we at temperature-wise? Looks like we're still at 39. I think the snow's supposed to start by the time we wrap things up tonight between at 6:30, maybe closer to 7 o'clock. Were you too scared off by the forecast to come in?
Yeah, Paul Hudner, who I follow religiously on Twitter, I think used the term wind-whipped heavy snow. And so that was plenty.
Yeah.
Yes, plenty for me to avoid.
Wind-whipped snow. I love that. That's outstanding.
Heavy snow.
Heavy snow. Sorry. Yeah, the heavy. I can't forget about the heavy part. Okay. So, I think we're all trying to figure out whether anything substantively has changed from what I felt like was a prevailing wisdom that Darnold was gone, that one way or another it was likely he was going to end up someplace else. How do you read the tea leaves now? Because it seems like every jackal nationally that's gotten in on this story, when they started going down this road last night, really, after we got off the air, it was not going to franchise him, but they are very much into seeing if they can find a way to just sign a contract with him, to extend him, to keep him here. Do you believe there's much voltage to that, or do you think it's more kind of, all right, that's what you say out loud, and we always want to keep all our options open as a team, but it doesn't really mean it's likely that they're actually going to come to terms?
I think it has followed the pattern that they followed with Kirk Cousins last year, at least to this point, where they were honestly negotiating with Kirk and going over various possibilities for what they could do in terms of bringing him back for essentially one more year. But the difference is that was at a time when the Falcons were already emerging as a top candidate to sign him to a deal that would blow anything the Vikings were going to do out of the water. And the difference now is we just don't know if there's going to be that kind of offer or even any offers for Sam Darnold next week when free agency begins. And I say any offers, I mean any like big time. Obviously, the Vikings aren't going to match or be interested in that level. It could come up. It could be that those teams are just being quieter than the Falcons were last year about it. But to this point, it's not clear where the obvious destination for Sam Darnold would be. And if he doesn't have an obvious destination for where he's going to be an unquestioned starter for multiple years, if he signs, then maybe it becomes a situation where the Vikings could bring him back at a level that financially that doesn't really hurt them if J.J. McCarthy ends up becoming the starter.
One of the NFL Network insiders, I don't remember which, mentioned either last night or today that he believes that a large part of the reason that they ultimately, the Vikings didn't franchise him was there was not, as you say, to use your term, there was not an obvious team out there that seemed to send the right signals to the Vikings that made them confident enough to believe that they wouldn't be stuck with the contract, with the one-year contract over $40 million, and that entered into why ultimately the Vikings chose not to franchise him, that there probably was some interest in seeing what you could get for him. But if there's not an obvious team that is interested in paying him, even for the 1 year, $40+ million and give up draft capital, that it made it too risky for the Vikings to continue down that road. Do you agree?
Yeah, I don't think the Vikings were ever going to franchise him just to keep him. The idea would have been, obviously, to franchise him and then hold him for the highest bidder in a trade. Yep. And so in order to do that, you need multiple teams that are realizing each other are both competitors for him and want to see if they can get a deal done ahead of free agency so they don't have to just bid against each other for contract-wise. And so that clearly didn't materialize. There is not enough excitement in the market for Sam Darnold that multiple teams were going to make trade offers to try to preempt the free agent frenzy that would otherwise occur. You know, so that we got at least got that much out of what happened with this tag, and we'll see whether there's I don't want to say lukewarm, but if there's less frenzied interest for him once the market actually opens and teams feel confident. Because the other part of that is you weren't going to do a trade with a team that Sam Darnold didn't really want to go to,
right? Because
he could just refuse to agree to a contract extension, and they would have to just acquire him as a 1 year tag situation, which you don't want to do. And so all those things together, totally makes sense that the franchise tag didn't work out. Whether they're actually going to truly pursue him as someone to actually be on their roster for the year is another question.
Are you surprised there seems to be so little of a market, at least to this point, one that would be willing to say, we're desperate enough, but we've seen enough from this kid in this second iteration here to say, we'll give up some draft capital, not a lot. We'll give you something, and we'll be willing to pay. Given what seems to be a dearth of very viable options, are you surprised the market doesn't seem more robust?
A little bit, because it's not as if everybody who is looking for a starting quarterback can sit back and just go draft their guy, because that's the other part of it. There's not really like other than Cam Ward and maybe Shedeur Sanders that you'd say I'll sit back and wait for one of those guys. So there's going to have to be some free agent quarterbacks signed, by teams that are going to have to be week one starters at some point. And so I don't know if I'm surprised that there weren't multiple teams, because you need multiple teams in that situation to be willing to put up draft picks. But and if there's only one team that's kind of secretly interested, they wouldn't necessarily. They could just sit tight and wait for him to become available, and that's exactly what is going to happen here. But we really won't know. I can't say I'm surprised that there's no interest in him overall, because I don't know that for sure. I just know that there hasn't been any interest that has bubbled up to a public level to tell us, yes, indeed, there's a team or teams who want to pay him multiple years of market level quarterback money in order to do it.
The Kevin Seifert joining us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. He, of course, writes for ESPN.com and joins us every week through the football season, which now, of course, pretty much goes 12 months a year. Clarify a bookkeeping question for us. If the Vikings had franchised him and then successfully traded him, the money doesn't continue to work against the Vikings cap, does it? I thought it got transferred, although Guardsy saw a quote from an agent making it sound like it would end up still coming back on the Vikings. Do you understand how those permutations work?
I think if the trade occurred, there wouldn't be any significant salary cap hit for the team that traded him. But if you tagged him with that idea and then you weren't able to trade him, then that's the risk.
Yes.
Then you have that entire amount of the tag on your salary cap ledger.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought that was the distinction, because obviously it becomes a you could even talk yourself, even if you wanted on the front end to say, yeah, I would consider it. You could talk yourself out of it on that basis if you trade them and you get an asset as in a draft pick, but you're still facing the sort of the salary cap restrictions that you're trying to avoid. That didn't make a lot of sense to me, but I'm glad we were able to clarify that too. Where does the player himself come in here? Because, we've all assumed that in the end, players have to take the best deal, especially if there's a considerable difference between what another team would offer and what the Vikings would offer. But is it insane to consider the possibility that if and I don't know, you tell me what the number is. Is it if the Vikings offered 2 years, $40 million with I assume some considerable incentives built in, they could raise that number pretty substantially. Is that enough of a number for this particular quarterback who clearly has not enjoyed some of his previous stops to say, I don't care what the chalk says. I don't care what I'm supposed to do. I know what I got in the quarterback whisperer. I am willing to take a significant hit to stay here. Is that even possible?
I mean, it's not out of the question. He would not be the first player to take less money to go to a preferable situation. In a 2-year, $40 million contract, you can be guaranteed $35 million of it, and so then you can cut him after 1 year, and turns into a 1 year $35 million. So that the structure of that 2-year $40 million would be pretty important. And I would, if he were only to be guaranteed $20 million, like that would be a massive cut from what you would expect a starting quarterback coming off a 4,000-yard, 35 touchdown season. But what you don't often see is players taking the option where their playing time is less guaranteed, because the Vikings, are they going to guarantee that Sam Darnold, you're the starter? We have J.J. McCarthy here; he's healthy, but we're guaranteeing that you'll be the starter the whole season. Even if they said that, I don't think anyone would be willing to trust that, and they shouldn't, because the Vikings will always do what's best for winning the game that week or winning games over the course of a season. So to me, that's the most awkward part, is a guy who certainly played well enough that if he had been on a multi-year contract, you wouldn't even be discussing whether he's going to be a starter or not. You throw 4,000 yards and you have 35 touchdowns and you come back and you have to compete for your job, essentially, no matter what they might say publicly or no matter what the contract might say. I mean, look what happened to Kirk Cousins last year. So Sam Darnold's been around long enough to know, because he was a top draft pick himself, those guys play. When J.J. McCarthy's ready to play, he's going to play. And that could be in week 1 this year. It could be in week 6, whatever. And so that's what Sam would have to be accepting, no matter what might be said publicly or what might be in his contract. And that would be the part that's really unusual, is for him to.
That's true.
Presumably that there, if there's another place out there where maybe the team isn't projected to be as competitive, but is giving him a better, what's on paper tells you have a much better chance to be a starter. Maybe that doesn't exist and this would be the best place. But otherwise, you don't often see players take the path where it's less likely that they're going to be on the field.
Well, then, but on the other hand, maybe Sam's ready to bet on himself to say, I did break through enough. Because Gargi and I were talking about this earlier. I think if you sign him to a 1 year or 2 year deal, he has to start the season as your starter, doesn't he? I mean, we said from the very beginning, if he throws an interception in the first quarter of the first home game, he's going to get booed in a way he wouldn't have last year because nobody was clamoring for Mullins, and they're going to clam for JJ. I grant that, but he'd have to be the starter. You'd have to bring him back as the starter at the start, wouldn't you?
What if JJ kills it in training camp and in the preseason? Like what would be the point of not playing JJ McCarthy? And I'm not saying he's ready to do that. I have no idea. None of us do. But in that scenario, he wasn't having a terrible camp last year. He was having a pretty good camp, and he was coming on pretty strong. And who knows how it would have ended before in week 1 last year. But if he kills it in training camp and he has these great preseason games and the players are all rallying, they like him, and like, do you just not play him because you told Sam Darnold that if you sign here, will be your week 1 starter? Like that, to me, and I don't know the answer to that. I'm saying that's a real issue, though.
Yeah, I would argue that if you're the incumbent quarterback who's come off the kind of season he's come off of, notwithstanding the way it finished, which we know is part of the story, that you do, and you get re-signed for 1 or 2 years, you do get grandfathered in. There's no guarantee that you're going to continue to play, but I would even say, training camp's wonderful, but I'm more interested in seeing how guys play in games. So to me, it wouldn't be that much of a stretch to still say, well, Sam's going to start, and we're going to see where this thing goes. Now, if what you're saying is true to the extent you believe it is, then you're back to, why? Maybe you don't even bother with, why are we even bothering with Sam at all?
Yeah, and that's they need somebody to pair with him, and then you get into he's probably the best candidate in terms of skills and recent performance to be that person, and if he's willing to come here and be the foil or be the guy that is available if JJ is not ready, then that's good for the team for sure. But I just question whether that is something that he or any player would want to do, and I'm sure he would start training camp at
right
as the starter, but you're talking about week 1 the season, to me, that's he'd have to hold on / win the job, and if McCarthy is killing it and he's the future of the team, what would be the point of waiting?
What kind of how quickly is this likely to be resolved one way or the other? Are we talking about a week off? Are we talking about this could drag on for quite some time? What do you think?
I think I think Monday is the day when the negotiating period starts, and a lot of times we get word within a day or two of the start of that period, at least what offers are on the table, who's interested, who's talking, and I think it will happen pretty quickly. There wouldn't be any, that position is so important for what happens after that in terms of how much you're budgeting for in the Vikings case. If Darnold doesn't come back, they have to pursue Daniel Jones or whoever else going to be that you're going to pair with McCarthy. And so those things tend to happen relatively quickly.
Kyle from Isanti, on a different subject, wants to know if you believe, since the Eagles are releasing Slay, is he a B-flow guy? We know the Vikings like their veteran corners. Does he have anything left in the tank?
I think he was going to count a ton against their cap, and he's looking to play maybe 1 more year. And, there's talk that he could be interested with the Eagles, but I think their focus right now is Byron Murphy. And if they're going to sign him, he'll be the guy that they pay the actual money to, and we'll see who else they put around him. But I guess I can't rule it out, but I'm not aware of any desire for the Vikings to jump out in free agency and sign him.
This is from 218 guy, unnamed. You just wasted 15 minutes of all of our lives. Sam is gone. JJ to JJ, shut up. That seems a bit harsh, but anyway.
No, but the interesting thing is, and maybe it's a vocal minority, but like people are really not in favor, at least the people that are replying on social media and the people I'm hearing from talking, like there's not a groundswell support for bringing Sam Darnold back.
Oh no, here it's like I'm saying 85-15 against. People are bitter.
Is that what you're getting?
Oh
yeah.
God, yes.
And so and it's always the people who are on one side, on the far, that speak up. I don't know what the entire fan base thinks, but it would be perfectly natural for everyone to be excited about the young, draft pick that no one's actually seen play in pressure situations, at least on the NFL level. And so, if they bring Darnold back and that pushes back JJ McCarthy's timetable and makes it a little bit more difficult to sign players in free agency, then there's going to be some bitterness, and that doesn't. The Vikings shouldn't make their decisions based on what the immediate reaction of either fans or media is, but I don't suspect that if they do sign Sam Darnold, it will be party in the streets.
Matt from Bismarck with an interesting angle. What if the Vikings do sign Darnold to a 1 or 2 year deal for $20 million a year, which he says, for the record, he's against, like everybody else apparently who's texting in.
Yeah.
And then a quarterback for a contending team goes down in training camp, a.k.a. Teddy Bridgewater. Is there a possible Sam Bradford situation on the horizon where we're the team that gets a nice extra pick that we did not expect, and we trade away a quarterback who we wanted to keep as, an option, when deep down we all know we're ready to start the J.J. McCarthy clock?
Yeah, and I've heard that brought up, and that would be a good scenario if it were to happen. Especially if JJ McCarthy proves he's healthy and ready to play, but I don't think you go into it signing Sam, saying oh yeah, if JJ's ready, we'll just trade him, because you need an injury or some other kind of turn of events to prompt that.
All right, so at this point, it's official, right? Because the deadline was 3:00 Central. There's not any chance we're going to find out something 2 hours later that they did Chizer.
No, I was told it's done. There's no tag.
There's no tag. And by the way, update us on the McCarthy thing is interesting because I get it. He's the shiny new toy. He's highly regarded, as you say. He showed some promise. Certainly, there was indication on the basis of the rhetoric from within the organization, from the quarterback whisperer, that they even maybe felt that, hey, he might be ready we might be able to put more on his plate than we thought almost from the beginning. And yet, I say to you, he's coming off a significant injury, and we have not had him on the field long enough to see any warts, right? So the people who are bitter and apoplectic about even considering leaving the door open for Darnold for another year or perhaps two, are they falling into any kind of a trap here on a quarterback who still has to prove at this level that he is up to all of this fanfare?
Yeah, there are some legitimate reasons to pump the brakes on JJ McCarthy if you're at all inclined. I think he threw 700 passes in his time at Michigan, and if you do the average of the other 5 guys in his class, it's more than twice that. So he came in to the NFL, far behind in terms of just the on the field experience level. And I think we've talked about this before. He's the first quarterback taken in the first round in the modern draft era, going back to 1967, to miss the entire season, the entire rookie season, because of an injury. So we've never had, a quarterback in his position in terms of not even being able to practice during the course of the season, being away from the team during a portion of it, at least, while he was having surgery and getting to a point where he could even kind of walk and move around. And so these are just facts. It doesn't mean he can't overcome them. It's not his fault that Michigan ran a running based offense and he didn't throw a lot, but he has a lot more than your basic second year quarterback to overcome.
Yep.
than most of them do. And so, like, there's certainly reason to say, like, there's more reasons to say, like, well, we have to see what we have here before that you would with other guys, but that doesn't mean he can't overcome it either.
We appreciate the time today, and we'll, I guess, we'll hopefully get some further resolution early next week.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Kevin Seifert, ESPN.com, with the very latest on what I think for some people is a troubling turn. The notion that there's a possibility that even though the Vikings have officially not franchised Darnold, that they might still well be ready to negotiate with him and to see if they can come to terms to bring him back into the equation, if not as the starter, although I think he'd have to be at the start of the process, as further insurance if they can get him at what they deem as at a reasonable rate. And I guess that's one of the questions. What's the number? What's the sweet spot? And is it is it a high enough number for the quarterback himself to tell his agent, I don't care if I can get another $10 million a year someplace else or even more. I want to stick with the quarterback whisperer. I want to stick at a place where I've had the success. And you know what? I want to find out if I can make good for the way I finished the season. You know, for all we know, he's saying, look, yeah, I know how it finished. It was lousy, but I want another crack at it. It's the first year in the system with this QB, with this group. We generally are more generous in grading early with some patience when it comes to quarterbacks, their first go-around, when they, for the first time in their careers, find themselves in a pressure situation.